You're listening to Bad Dog Agility, bringing you training tips, interviews, and news about the great sport of dog agility. And now, here are your hosts, Sarah and Esteban.
I'm Esteban.
And I'm Sarah, and this is episode 184. Today's podcast is brought to you by Elite Science. Unlock your dog's full potential with the unique competitive edge solution, 1TDC. 1-tetradecanol complex is a patented blend of unique fatty acid oils designed to safely and effectively keep joints and muscles at their best to maximize performance and shorten recovery time. 1TDC is the next generation of fatty acids and is used by many current and past national agility champions and world team members. All of our listeners will automatically qualify for a great 1TDC special offer by purchasing online at bda1tdc.com. That's BDA, the number 1, TDC.com.
Today's podcast is also brought to you by hittedboard.com. Hittedboard.com has the innovative training tools you need for agility. Having problems with the dog walker A-frame? The Hitted Board can fix that. Your dog doesn't like tugging? They'll love the Tug It. Can't move your A-frame around by yourself? The Move It can. Go to hittedboard.com and use discount code BDA10 to get 10% off your order. That's hittedboard.com. Today,
we're going to be busting your excuses for why you're not achieving in dog agility.
I've got a million excuses. I have an excuse for every day of the week. I've got 2 excuses for Sunday, which is usually the last day of a trial.
So that sounds mean. It sounds harsh, like we're going to really get on your case. But really, we want to empower you to move past whatever limitations you have and to achieve more than you're achieving today. So we actually want it to be a fun podcast, an exciting podcast, something that after this podcast, you can get out there and have a fresh start to your year.
And like I said, I have a ton of different excuses, but I think most of your excuses and my excuses can be kind of put into some broad categories. So I think if we attack those, we can kind of cover all of the different variations of excuses out there.
Sounds good. So let's start with the big one.
I think the big one is time. In this day and age, that's what people are going to reach for. And it's a real excuse. It's pretty legitimate.
I think the thing about time is truly finite. Out of everything else that we might talk about, there really are only 24 hours in the day, period, end of story. And you cannot change that fact. So we kind of want to talk, when we talk about these excuses, we want to try to tease out what are real issues that we have to work around and what are the things that are in our head. And time is one of those things that is real.
Yeah.
But is it?
Well, yeah. So not all time is created equal, right? 1 minute of your day at 3 a.m. is very different from 1 minute of your day, like when you're trying to get the kids off to school and get the dogs all settled. That's a very different 1 minute, even though, objectively you'd say that's the same 60 seconds in time. And so I think it's very important that everybody knows you have some time every day that you could set aside for agility. For example, if the average American is watching a couple hours of TV a day and you're the average American and you don't need all of those 2 hours for your TV watching, just set aside 15 or 20 minutes, then you can come up with the time. But it's not enough to come up with 15 or 20 minutes, I would argue, because if you're doing your TV watching between 10 and midnight, 10 p.m. and midnight, is that really the ideal time to dog train? Probably not, right?
Very
so you
true.
are somewhat limited in your windows, even when you look at classes to take. So let's say that, I'm a beginner. I don't really have any equipment or the knowledge to really train on my own. I need to look for a class and I work basically 9 to 5. I can't get out to some place until maybe 7 o'clock, with traffic. And so now I'm limited between 7 and after that, and only on the days that they offer classes. And so I think time becomes an issue there, where literally you might not have the time because suddenly you have, maybe your job requires you to work every Tuesday evening with some client or something, And so not all time is created equal, even though anyone can come up with some extra time in a
Extra
day,
time,
right?
right.
Because that's the first thing anyone's going to tell you. Oh, look, dude, you're wasting so much time in a day. Surely you can come up with the 5 minutes you need to get in the agility training that you do. And that's the other important thing to realize about agility and time, that in some ways you need a lot of it. If I'm an instructor and I'm teaching a class and I'm setting up a course for 6 students and putting together a lesson plan, there's a lot of preparation that goes into that. So for that 1 hour that a student or several students will be there, or a private lesson, there's setup and it goes well beyond an hour. But for you as the person rolling out into your backyard to get some training done, it really does take just a few minutes.
Right. Well, I think the actual training time is just a few minutes. You want to make sure you're giving your dog rest. And so, that kind of feeds into what you were saying, because your time, you can separate your time into time on the field, right? But if you want to be prepared for that time on the field, you need to do some planning. And that planning does not need to be in daylight hours. Mm-hmm. It does not need to be even right before you go out onto the field. So you can kind of find some of your time that way by partitioning your planning away from your actual.
Now you've gotten to it. It's time management. You need to understand where the important blocks of time are for your dog. And the number one block of time for me, so let's just look at our situation specifically. That'll really help out. We are constrained in terms of period of time by 2 things. We do not have lights in our yard.
When we don't have an indoor facility. Same thing, right? Same problem.
Right. So we need sun. We need sunlight. So it has to be during daylight hours. Obviously very different in the summer and the winter. Okay. Problem number 2 is weather, temperature. We live in Houston. It is very extreme in the summer. Right? So now you've got all this light, sure, during the day, but you know what? It's 100 degrees with 100% humidity. You can't be out there training your dog. So you have to get them early in the morning or early in the evening. And so what we're saying here is, the blocks of quality time that you need for your dog, and you must protect that time, that portion of the day on those days you are going to dog train.
So like for the winter, we might go dog train at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and then do our workout at 7 o'clock at night, right? In the summer, we might flip-flop that around. We might be working out at 5 o'clock in the evening and then come home and do our dog training at 7 o'clock at night while it's still light but cool. So you kind of manipulate your time that way. But, a lot of what we've talked about with time so far has been about creating more time in some way by time management, by separating your planning and your actual time out in the field. But I think that there is another way to approach time, which is efficiency. So you don't actually increase the amount of time, but you use it better. You get more done. And there's, lots of different ways to do that, but some of it is having a good plan so that you aren't wasting time when you go out there.
Oh, definitely.
For a lot of people, that's what online classes do. They structure their training. And so some of the time that they would have to spend designing sequences or figuring out what they want to do, they're basically
how to handle.
They're basically offloading that responsibility to another party, an instructor, and saying, I would rather, I only have so much time. I want my time spent actually training agility, not on the planning. So I'm going to have somebody else do the planning for me. And that's totally legitimate. It's a great reason to do classes.
Sure. People who even have the space. So there are people who live out on acreage, farms, what have you. They got all this space. They've got all the equipment. They've got all the contact equipment. And sure, they set stuff up, but sometimes they get tired of it. They want someone else to set up. They don't want to lug it around. They don't want to pick out a course map and design it perfectly. We know, because when we get ready for some of these big competitions, we'll do a couple courses a week. It takes time. You're out there. It could be like an hour, hour and a half, setting up the course, tweaking it, getting it just right, walking it, analyzing it, thinking about it. And then you're going to run it just for a couple of minutes, right? So your dog gets approximately a minute and a half on it. And the amount of prep that goes into it is like, what is that? It's like 30-1.
Right.
The minute ratio there. So, it's a lot of work, and you can just be like, well, I'm just going to go up and take classes with this instructor. I've heard people say, well, this instructor's not great or anything, but at least I don't have to go set everything up. I can just go and practice, and she lets me do my own thing. How often do you hear that? You hear that a lot. And it's about time management. So you have to figure out what's effective for you. But I like your point about efficiency. I'm a much more efficient trainer now than I was 10 years ago. And I like the idea of protecting the prime time, that juicy, really good time where the temperature's right, the lighting is good, and really giving that to your dog, telling your kids and your spouse, hey, I need you guys to cover for me 10 minutes right here now. This is your moment to shine, guys.
Right. So I think we've covered time, and we're basically saying it is a very real limitation, but we've given some ideas of how to work around that. All right. So what's next?
I'm going to go with energy because it kind of goes hand in hand with time. And we're going to get to money because I know that's what people are thinking about.
They're waiting for it.
But I want to talk about energy because I think that's a really big one. And it's one that maybe not everybody thinks about. And you kind of run into the same situation. A lot of good intentions and lots of planning. And suddenly you get to the day. I can't tell you how many times this happened to me where it's time to go drive an hour and a half to your agility class. And you just don't have the energy to do it. I used to go train with people years and years and years ago. And when I stopped going, the first thing anyone asks is, oh, were you guys having trouble? Were you having a fight?
Did you have a
disagreement?
Right.
Do you think you're too good for lessons now? No, you know what? I was really tired. And it's an hour going up. It's an hour going back. And now I've got 2 extra hours in my day by not going. Now, obviously, if you don't have any equipment at all, that's not really an option for you, especially if places are far away. But you know that energy is very much an issue. Okay. And that means whenever you can, it's a very similar solution, in fact, to the time management. My solution is give your dog the first energy. So whatever is the hardest thing for you to do, and in this case, we're dog agility people, so we're going to say the answer is dog agility, not working out, not, working through your marriage issues with your spouse, not cooking breakfast for your kids and helping them with their homework. We're going to give our first energy to the dogs. When are you most energetic? And for the vast majority of the people, it's going to be
the morning.
Right. Maybe after you have your coffee, maybe you're a little bit of a slow starter, a little grumpy. I know I'm a little bit of a slow starter.
10:30. That's like that coffee. Kind of morning.
Right. But it's very different. You feel very differently at 6 o'clock after a 8-hour workday, 6-hour workday, or whatever that you do. You know what? I've had days days off where I just sit around and watch ESPN and TV and play on Facebook and play computer games and stuff like that.
You still feel
you are just as tired at 6 or 7 o'clock at night. So even then, it really doesn't matter, whether you're working, not working, retired, not retired. Give your first energy to your dog, and that's training in the morning. And for me, that was a revelation. When I got out there and I did it, not only did I get it done, the checklist is done, it somehow gave me more energy.
You go out there for another session.
When I train at 7 o'clock at night and I finish, I don't feel more energetic. I feel exhausted, even more exhausted. I was tired before, and now I'm even more tired after. I used to fall asleep driving home. All right. And I'll tell you, I'm very honestly, as a doctor, I have been tired. Okay. We work 30-hour shifts. I used to work 30-hour shifts, delivering babies and working in a high-risk OB, right, over at the Bentop, which is the general hospital. 30 hours in a row. And then I drove straight to Reliant to go run that Rottweiler.
That's true.
And then I laid down on the concrete, fell asleep. I just couldn't get up.
You know what?
You guys couldn't wake me up from my run. And didn't you end up running my dog? I thought I could do it. You just cannot.
We're going to take a little break here, and I'm going to one up I work 30 hours delivering babies and say, I grew a baby, grew a human child, and was so exhausted.
Did you also do it in 30 hours? Because if you didn't do it in 30 hours or less, I'm not impressed.
All right. We'll let the peanut gallery decide whose accomplishment is more impressive.
I think they'll side with you, so I withdraw my statement.
But yes, energy is a very real thing. And that's a good workaround, a good strategy. I think the other strategy is to basically not really even give yourself an alternative. For a lot of times, like don't entertain the idea of not going, because just like going to the gym, a lot of times, once you get there, you feel great. Once you're done, you feel accomplished. But it was the starting that was so hard. So if you, or like dieting, like don't eat that first potato chip because then it's really hard to say no to potato chip number 2.
That should be a real thing. First potato chip syndrome.
Yes. Let's patent it.
I have it.
You have it.
I have it right now.
You've been diagnosed by a doctor.
That's right. Self-diagnosed.
That's right.
All right.
All right. So that's energy. Are you ready to get to the big one?
Oh, the big one. The Scrooge McDuck.
Money.
Money. Money, money, money. And you're going to hear this all the time. You're going to think it all the time. And it's that I don't have enough money. Very few people have all the money that they want.
True.
At least in the agility world. Maybe, in other circles, you go to some conference of CEOs from Silicon Valley, sure. Okay. They've got all the money they need. But, for the rest of us, it's a big deal. And a lot of us have to make choices. And choices can be as basic as how many runs do I enter in a day? How many days can I show? Especially for the students that are listening, right? You're in college, you're in graduate school, you do agility as often as you're able to, but frequently you go into weekends knowing you can only show one day out of that weekend, maybe once a month, twice a month, maybe 1 3-day show. And so money there's 2 strategies in my mind. And you can tell me if you agree or disagree, Sarah. And number 1 is management. I can choose money that I'm spending in one place and instead choose to spend it in another place. And I'm not just talking about taking money away from your kids, for example. I'm not going to buy them new school clothes. I'm going to spend it on, an extra agility trial. What I'm really talking about is money within the sport.
That's the big one that I was going to point out because I think it goes hand in hand with the podcast that we did on choosing your own agility adventure. So, I at least anecdotally have, heard people talk about not wanting to do XYZ because they don't want to spend the money or they don't have the money to spend, let's say on a seminar or something, but go to a trial and enter fast. And I have nothing against fast, but if you are constrained by money, fast is a class that gets you nothing other than the run itself, right? So if you are struggling to qualify for nationals and you don't know if you can go to enough shows because of money to qualify for nationals, should you spend money on fast and time to beat? I would argue no, if your goal is to go to nationals and if money is the reason you're not sure that you can, right? So it's about, so you, like you said, you can take money within the sport, or if you've already qualified for nationals, maybe you skip a weekend that you would normally go and instead do a workshop or a seminar or something like that. So I think that I think for all of these, there are elements that are both real and imagined in terms of the limitation. And I think that, that some people don't always consider, what they legitimately could give up to do the things that they want to do.
And you're just talking about, seminars versus classes versus online classes. Let me give you one other. I have certain unnamed friends in agility who love to get their nails painted before big shows. And apparently these manicures and pedicures cost a little bit of money. They also like to get their hair done. They also like to buy new glittery shoes and shirts and write their dog's name all over these fancy harnesses. And they've got like 6 harnesses. Okay, look, I'm not being judgmental. And my friends aren't the type to complain about money. I'm just saying that if you're one of those people where money is a real issue, try to look at spaces within your dog world, within your realm, where maybe you're spending money that you don't necessarily need to spend. And again, it's about prioritizing, right, your goals. Sure, it's important that your dog look good, but that collar they're wearing could probably last for several years. Your dog probably doesn't need 10 different collars, right, to color coordinate with this year's theme at AKC Nationals in Reno, right? Maybe you don't need to buy all the things that you can at your national specialty. Because I know for myself, how many different bags can one person have from, the Rottweiler specialty, or, when you go to nationals and you get all those national shirts and pins and things like that you can buy in addition to whatever, they give you.
Well, and I think the other thing, and, it's basically completely covered by the Choose Your Own Adventure podcast, but is to recognize that you don't have to, you don't need to, and you can't do everything in agility. Just because there is a trial doesn't mean you have to go. Just because there's a seminar doesn't mean you have to go. And you have to learn how to not always feel like you're missing out because of the things that you're not doing, because you're always not doing some things. Every time you do one thing, you're not doing a whole bunch of other things, right? So if you spend all of your time upset or worried about the things that you're not doing, then you're going to spend your time, very unhappy. But if, so maybe it's not even about doing more with your money. Maybe it's about accepting that you are doing what you can and being okay with that and not letting the things that you're not doing because of money derail your enjoyment of the sport.
One other thing I'll say, and this one may be a little bit more subtle because a lot of you up to this point may be thinking, oh, I'm really good with money or I'm really set here. Others of you are thinking, oh, well, I never have enough of it. And, I'm not sure what you're saying is going to work. But let me talk about cost benefit analysis in the context of agility. So we are getting ready for Westminster, like a month away. Okay. We got get you entered in 2 trials coming up. She is not yet here. She is in New Orleans. So we still have to get her over here in a week or so. These 2 trials coming up where we're going to show 2 days each trial, not even all 3 days, just 2 of the days, right? I think like a Friday, Saturday, very valuable. So whatever the entry cost is, approximately 60 a day, whatever it is. Okay. These trials are very valuable compared to this same 2 trials in October. So even though it costs the same, you're getting the same amount of days, same amount of opportunity to queue and all that. These are much higher value. And I think everybody can see obviously why. It's the timing. It's right before Westminster. So when we really need to brush up, get the refresher, get the timing, get the rhythm back between us, fix her start lines. She's going to come back. She's going to push that start line on me. And I need these trials to get it done. These trials are very important to me. High value. Okay. I am not, you know what else I'm not going to do? I'm not going to go to some seminar the week before nationals or tryouts or some big event. Okay. It doesn't make sense to spend your money there, to spend your time there. During the off season, maybe that's when I want to do that. So you guys should have, and this kind of goes hand in hand with goal setting and a bunch of other stuff, but there should be a cost benefit analysis here because just like a minute of the day, it has different value at different times. And so the same $50 means very different things at different points in the year and at different times in your dog's training. There are just times where you don't need it. Another great example is when you've already qualified for nationals. Guess what? You can back off the showing, cut it 30%, put all that money into your pocket, and now suddenly you can sign up for a bunch of really good online courses. You can go to that awesome camp in another state. Now you can stay that extra day and upgrade to a nice hotel for nationals because you've cut back on that because you didn't need that. Now that's up to you. Everybody's different. If you don't do it, I'm not going to fault you. I'm just saying the possibility exists for you to kind of rethink the way you distribute your funds and understand that you can do this kind of analysis, self-analysis, and maybe get a little more out of your dollar.
All right, the next one we're going to talk about is equipment and space. So real or imagined?
I'm going to go with real. Now how important it is, I think that can be imagined. Obviously, well, maybe not obviously. Maybe people don't know. I know that there are people who have been very successful, even world championship level successful, with very limited equipment or no equipment at all at home. Maybe a jump, maybe a set of weaves. And that's really the most common thing. Whatever equipment they have problems with, that's usually the one they're going to end up getting. So I know people who don't have anything except a set of weave poles and a seesaw because those were the 2 things that their dog couldn't really do, but they ended up being national level competitors. World team members are doing very well. And you don't need a lot of space. You know who doesn't have all this space that we have here in America? Everybody over in Europe. Okay. And it turns out they're very good at dog agility. And so classes, group training, those training fields is very important to them. Over here now, we even chose where we live on a corner lot to get the most backyard space we could get. So even though we can't put a whole course in our yard, not even close, we can put up a good 5, 6, 7 obstacles. And that's really all we need to be able to get all the work done that we need to get done to excel at a very high level in the sport. So it's a myth in terms of you don't need every piece of equipment. You don't need a 100 by 100 field. You don't need, perfect grass. You don't need an indoor facility. You can definitely do more than just get by. You can really excel in the sport without any of that.
And I think you've got multiple areas where you can get that access. If you're taking a class, that's one of the things you are paying for is that equipment and that space and the instruction, right? But you're also paying for the equipment and the space, and it's very important. And like you said, people get further along in the sport. They really know how they're going to handle, and they pay that monthly fee just to show up at a field with equipment.
Not only that, let's say I've got a new dog. And I don't have a new dog. Let's say I did have a new dog. Or when I did have a new dog. No, everybody's getting excited. He's got a new dog. No, I don't have a new dog.
Hypothetically, when you got a new dog.
Yeah, when you're getting them ready to debut and all they've seen is my equipment, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to take them on a tour of equipment all around the local area, which for me is Houston. I'm going to go everywhere I can for free and everywhere I can for pay. Again, this dollar is more valuable for me to get on this equipment at this club in an environment that this new dog hasn't been in than it would be that same dollar for my veteran who's working on like Mach 3.
And this is where I think training groups are really important. So it's not just about paid classes. You can often get several like-minded people. They've become friends at the trial, and one of them has the space, and they're willing to have, friends over, and it becomes a whole social event, but you're also getting all of your dog training.
That's what agility's always been from the start.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a great answer to the equipment and space. I think the other answer is to be creative with the space that you have. Like you said, a 50 by 60 space, there's a lot of training that you can do in a 50 by 60 space. And, I know that contacts and weaves are always problematic for people, but there's a lot of agility besides contact and weave. So while yes, ideally it would be nice to have all of the equipment, like don't forget about the fact that you can do a lot of training with just jumps and some space. And then get your contact and weave training done. That's what you get done other places, at friends' places, at your local training facility or whatever.
All right. And let's get to the last one, and that's knowledge and experience. And I think this is very, very relevant. I think it's a real thing, especially for the beginner. Not just for the beginner, though. I think even if you've been in the sport a long time, you can recognize that the sport is changing. I got to tell you, I was talking with Sarah today, and I was like, if I don't stay on top of it, I'm not out there watching videos, checking results of major competitions. And I'm not talking about looking at the time and seeing who's good now and who did one good run. I'm looking at the handling. I'm looking at the course design.
Looking at the mistakes that are made over and over.
Absolutely. Really studying it for myself. Number one, self-improvement. Number two, for, our students, the VIPers that we work with. And, number three, just for our general, Bad Dog Agility audience, putting out that content. And you can spend a lot of time doing that. And I think right there is your hint for the answer. If I'm already doing it, do you need to be doing it too?
Right. So here's where you really lean on your resources, your online resources, your local resources, the people that you trust, the people that you have agreed with in the past, right? And if you liked what they said about X, maybe you'll like what they say about Y.
Yeah, your instructor, your experienced friend.
But here's I think the big myth though. And I think the myth that goes with knowledge and experience is you can only get better. You can only get better through time, right? It's just a process, and it's just going to take time. And there is some truth to that, except I can take 3 different people and they can be in 3 vastly different places in their career after a year. right?
Yes.
After 3 months, after 6 months. So it's not just about the time. It's not something that magically happens. It's what you end up doing with that time, how you structure your training, who you're getting help from. And I love watching, one of the things that I really have enjoyed as an instructor is watching people who are new to the sport and how fast some of them come along. And a lot of times it's because they don't know any better, right? They don't know any better in that they don't know that it's supposed to take a long time or go slow. And so they get right out there and they set up your challenge sequence that you've put together that, probably isn't really geared for their level, but they set it up and they work through it and they try it and they're constantly pushing what they can do and they do a really good job. And so, I think that I think the two answers to busting through the myth of the knowledge and experience gap is to find your resources, use them effectively, but then also to push yourself, because you can spend a lot of time doing just the same things over and over and over, basically working on the same skills, and, they're good, and you get out and you're doing agility every day in your yard, but you're not rapidly building new skills. Mm-hmm. You're just kind of going through the motions, and maybe you don't even realize that's what you're doing. But I think that most people can do more in terms of technical experience, in terms of challenges. Mm-hmm. Specifically, most people and most dogs can do more than they think they can. And if they're pushing that,
it goes back to this idea that not all things are equal. You have one handler, they got 1,000 minutes with their dog. Compared to 1,000 minutes with my dog, I'm probably going to get more done. So, knowledge, experience, sure. I think you've got some good tips for people there. All right. Now, I think we've addressed all the big topics: time, energy, money, equipment and space, knowledge and experience, these kind of 5 big broad categories. And hopefully we've given you some strategies for kind of assessing your situation and seeing how you can work around it. Hopefully you've already thought of a lot of these things and kind of already worked around some of these things. And the last thing, I think, just to put some icing on everything, some icing on the cake, I think it's going to be mindset. Everyone listening here, if you're listening to this podcast, for the most part, unless this is the first one you've listened to, you love dog agility. Okay. You're like a crazy person who is crazy about the sport. Like, you want more and more of it. Like a real sports fan. They follow everything about their team. They read about their team. They watch their team. They buy clothes that have their team's logo on it. And that's how you are about dog agility with your dogs. And when you are that passionate, you can have this mindset. I'm not going to make excuses for myself. I'm going to identify these reasons where I'm having an issue, but I'm going to work through them because I want this.
Or I'm going to accept I think the important thing that we talked about in all of these is identify what portion of the constraint is real and what is imagined.
Yes.
Work around the real, throw away the imagined, right? And then accept where you are. Accept your personal set of limitations, because everybody, just like the choosing your own adventure, everybody has limitations in some way. And if we're going to enjoy this sport, we need to work within our limitations when they literally cannot be changed, and enjoy the process. And that's it for this week's podcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Elite Science and hititboard.com. Happy training.
What is red and smells like blue paint? Red paint.